The auction yard outside the dusty frontier town buzzed with noise, sweat, and careless laughter. Horses stomped in their pens, cattle bellowed, and men in wide-brimmed hats argued over prices as if they were trading sacks of grain instead of living souls. Near the far end of the wooden platform, half in shadow, stood a thin Apache girl with tangled black hair and frightened, watchful eyes. She couldn't have been more than 9 years old. Her dress was torn at the hem, her small shoulders too sharp beneath the faded cloth. A rough wooden tag dangled from her wrist, swinging slightly each time the wind kicked up dust around her bare, cracked feet. $2, the trader announced lazily, barely glancing at her. That's all she's worth. Some people chuckled. Others shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. A few stepped closer, inspecting her the way they had inspected horses earlier, checking her arms, turning her chin to the light. She did not resist. She did not cry. She simply stared past them, as if her spirit had retreated somewhere far beyond the desert horizon. Her parents had died during the bitter winter sickness that swept through what remained of her tribe. No relatives had come for her. No one had claimed her name. She stood alone in a world that had already decided she was worth less than a saddle. Hours dragged by. The sun climbed high, then began its slow descent. One by one, the crowd thinned as buyers left with their purchases. Still, no one bid. The trader sighed in irritation, muttering about wasted time. Just as the sky began to glow orange, a tall cowboy stepped forward from the edge of the yard. His boots were scuffed, his hat faded from years of sun. Loneliness seemed to trail behind him like a second shadow. He had no family waiting at home, only a quiet ranch and memories that echoed too loudly in empty rooms. He looked at the girl, truly looked at her. "I'll take her," he said quietly, placing 2 worn dollar bills on the table. The trader raised an eyebrow. "You sure about that? She ain't worth the trouble." The cowboy ignored him and knelt down until he was level with her eyes. His voice was steady but gentle. "What's your name, little one?" For a long moment, she hesitated. Then, barely above a whisper, she answered, "A pony." He held out his hand. "Well, a pony, let's go home." For the first time all day, she looked directly at someone, and didn't look away. The ranch sat miles away from town, surrounded by endless stretches of dry grass and open sky that seemed too wide for such a small girl. The house was old but sturdy, its wooden boards creaking with every gust of wind. When Daniel brought a pony there for the first time, she stood near the doorway, uncertain whether she was truly meant to cross the threshold. The smell of cooked beans and wood smoke drifted through the air, unfamiliar yet comforting. Daniel pushed the door open gently and stepped aside, giving her space instead of forcing her in. Inside, everything was simple. A rough wooden table, 2 chairs, a cast-iron stove, and a narrow bed against the far wall. It was not much, but it was clean and warm. Daniel placed a bowl of stew on the table and slid it toward her without saying a word. A pony hesitated before touching the spoon, as if she feared someone might snatch it away. When she finally tasted it, she ate slowly at first, then with quiet hunger. That first night, she refused to sleep in the small spare room. Instead, she curled up near the wall in Daniel's room, close enough to see him but far enough to run if she needed to. She woke twice from nightmares, her breathing sharp and panicked. Each time, Daniel stayed where he was and spoke softly into the darkness. "You're safe here." He did not try to touch her. He knew better than to rush broken trust. Days turned into weeks. A pony rarely spoke. She moved lightly through the ranch like a shadow, watching everything. She flinched when Daniel walked up behind her and stiffened at sudden noises. Daniel understood silence. It had been his only companion since the storm that had taken his wife and unborn child years ago. Grief had hollowed him out, leaving behind a man who worked hard and spoke little. Instead of asking questions about her past, he showed her small things. How to scatter feed for the chickens. How to brush a horse slowly so it wouldn't spook. How to sit on the porch at sunset and let the sky change colors without saying a word. He gave her time. One afternoon, while repairing a broken fence, Daniel slipped and sliced his palm against rusted wire. Blood ran quickly down his fingers. Before he could react, a pony rushed forward. Her hands trembled, but her movements were sure. She tore a strip from the edge of her dress and wrapped it tightly around his wound, tying a firm knot just as her mother had once taught her. Daniel looked at her, surprised. "Thank you, a pony." She didn't answer. But she didn't step away either. The first time Daniel took a pony into town after she had been living at the ranch for a few weeks, the air felt heavier than usual. The dirt road was crowded with wagons, and townsfolk moved between the general store, the saloon, and the blacksmith's shop. Conversations slowed as soon as they noticed the small Apache girl walking beside the tall cowboy. Curious stares turned into hushed whispers that followed them like a restless wind. "Why would he bring her here?" someone muttered near the store entrance. "She's Apache," another voice said, low but sharp. "Nothing but trouble." A pony kept her eyes on the ground, her fingers gripping the edge of Daniel's worn coat. She understood more English than people realized. Each word, even the quiet ones, landed like a small stone against her chest. Daniel felt the tension in her hand and slowed his pace, walking a little closer to her without making a show of it. Inside the general store, the shopkeeper gave a stiff nod. Daniel greeted him calmly and began gathering supplies: flour, beans, lamp oil. A pony stood silently near the doorway until a group of boys entered, loud and careless. One of them noticed her and smirked. "Hey," he said, tossing a pebble so it skidded near her bare feet. "Does she even talk?" The other boys laughed. A pony froze instantly, her body going rigid the way it had that first night at the ranch. Daniel straightened slowly and stepped between her and the boys. His voice wasn't raised, but it carried weight. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You've got chores to do, don't you?" The boys shuffled out, embarrassed under his steady gaze. The laughter faded, but the damage lingered in the air. A few days later, Daniel enrolled a pony in the small town school. The teacher hesitated, clearly unsure, but finally allowed her to sit in the back row. The classroom felt tight and noisy. The other children stole glances at her braids and worn dress. When she struggled to pronounce certain English words, a few giggles slipped through the room. Her cheeks burned, but she refused to cry. Every evening after that, Daniel sat across from her at the wooden ranch table, tracing letters on paper and sounding out words slowly. He was patient, even when she stumbled. "You're stronger than they know," he told her quietly. "Don't let them decide who you are." One afternoon, chaos erupted in town when a wild horse broke free from its rope, kicking over crates and sending people scrambling. Shouts filled the street as no one dared to get close. Before Daniel could stop her, a pony stepped forward. She moved slowly, her voice soft as she spoke in her native tongue, the words steady and calm. The horse's frantic movements slowed. Its breathing eased. Within minutes, she reached out and took hold of the trailing rope. The street fell silent. The same eyes that had judged her now stared in awe. Daniel felt something swell in his chest that he hadn't felt in years: pride. For the first time, the whispers began to change. Years passed across the wide desert like shifting sand, and the little girl who had once stood silent in an auction yard grew into a strong young woman whose presence carried quiet confidence. The ranch no longer felt hollow. Where silence once echoed through the wooden halls, laughter now drifted out the windows and across the fields. A pony moved across the land with natural grace, reading the sky and soil the way others read books. She understood the wind's direction, the meaning behind distant clouds, and the subtle signs animals gave before weather changed. Daniel often found himself watching her from the porch, marveling at how the frightened child had become the steady heart of his home. She still carried her heritage with pride. On quiet evenings, she painted traditional Apache symbols onto small wooden boards, explaining their meanings to Daniel in careful English. Strength. Protection. Family. He listened with the same patience he once used when teaching her letters, asking questions and memorizing every story she shared. In return, he taught her how to manage ranch accounts, negotiate fair cattle prices, and repair equipment. Their bond had grown not from obligation, but from shared healing. When a harsh drought struck the region, many ranchers panicked. Wells dried up, cattle grew thin, and fear spread quickly through town. Daniel's ranch struggled too, but Apache noticed subtle changes in the land that others overlooked. She remembered places her mother had once described, hidden low grounds where moisture lingered longer beneath the earth. Trusting her instincts, she guided Daniel to dig near a cluster of old mesquite trees. After hours of labor, damp soil appeared, followed by water. Word spread fast. The same townspeople who once whispered now came asking for her guidance. She shared what she knew without bitterness, walking them through signs in the land and sky. Respect replaced suspicion. Gratitude replaced doubt. On her 18th birthday, as the sun melted into a gold horizon, Daniel handed her a small envelope. His hands were steady, but his voice carried emotion. Inside were official adoption papers, signed and sealed. "You were never just someone I took in," he said quietly. "You're my daughter. You always have been." Apache's eyes filled with tears, but her smile was strong. She stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him without hesitation. The man who had once been consumed by loneliness now stood anchored by love. The world had once measured her worth at $2. But under the endless desert sky, surrounded by land they had nurtured together, they both knew the truth. Family is not chosen by blood or price. It is built by patience, courage, and the simple decision to stay.